With YouTube attacking alternative media, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon for just $1 per month. Link below. 2018 has been a hell of a year so far, right? It has, especially for gaming. I feel like, you know, you had the whole aftermath of the Battlefront 2 controversy, where EA lost a buttload of money on that game, so much so that Disney is now shopping around to different publishers in order to basically punish them for putting out bad content that no one purchases. And then, of course, we had the shootings, Parkland, and the subsequent debate around the AR-15. Many places like Dick's is no longer is going to be selling it. Walmart's no longer going to be selling guns to people under the age of 21. And it's been this national debate that's been very crazy. And so as a result, our president, Donald J. Trump, has chimed in. And earlier today, it came out on Twitter that he was going to be speaking with people in the video game industry about violent video games. He did mention it the other day. He tried to blame video games and movies for the actions of Parkland. There's been I think it's a state senator or representative out of Rhode Island that is trying to push a new sales tax for violent video games. Where once again, I kind of feel like in terms of just time being cyclical, we're really rolling back into the late 80s on this one, right? It's like a 30-year thing. It's like, oh my God, the Tipper Gore, Joseph Lieberman, you know, thing. The event in time that movie Bob Chipman, who I think is like my age, like 35, 36, calls his own personal Vietnam, or he acts as if the entire debate over video games and video game violence from the late 80s, early 90s was his personal Vietnam. It's just, no, it's, no, but that's movie Bob for you. So what do you expect? Anyway, Anita Sarkeesian criticizes Trump for anti-violent game rhetoric despite sharing Trump's views. Yeah, it's really great. Anita Sarkeesian was like the 2010s Jack Thompson, and now she's all of a sudden, because she's super anti-Trump, trying to be like, nuh-uh, I never said that. I never made those kind of claims. You can't put that on me. You don't know me. Oh no, Anita. I think I would argue out of almost anyone on YouTube, I'm one of the few that know you the best. And so yes, this title is 100% accurate. 100% accurate. And if you care to talk about it, I'll be at VidCon. And you could then once again have a black suited elite security guard make sure that if I talk to anybody, they're going to move to intercept me thinking I'm going to strike. That was fun. So thanks for that. Anyway, culture critic Anita Sarkeesian criticized President Donald Trump for his recent meetings and statements blaming video games or violent video games and movies for the Parkland, Florida high school shooting. She tweeted out that President Trump has been using video games as a scapegoat. Oh, yes. She says here, Trump using video games as a scapegoat. I'm sorry. Is that the pot meeting the kettle? I do believe it is. It's completely the pot meeting the kettle. That is the most hypocritical thing she has ever said. Oh my God. She has rallied on now. We're talking 6 years. 6 years in May from when she started her Kickstarter campaign, where she raised $158,922 for tropes versus women in video games, and she only finished it in 2017. It was supposed to be like 6 episodes, turned into 13, still took 5 years. She still stole video game footage for the very first episode. That's been proven. They manipulated Hitman footage to basically try to smear the game. That's also been proven. She's Jack Thompson, just with hoop earrings. Some of One Angry Gamer's readers feared the media would be latching onto her comments to use as a sounding board for anti-Trump screeds, despite the fact that Sarkeesian is no saint when it comes to criticizing video games for violence and sexism, and didn't hesitate to go to the United Nations in a bid to have censorship applied to online communities. It's not so much just online communities. I mean, quite frankly, and I mean this quite frankly, Anita Sarkeesian traveled to the United Nations with one Zoe Quinn in order to ask them to basically get people to stop criticizing her on the internet. As far as like top Anita Sarkeesian moments go, that's my personal favorite. That's my personal favorite. It really is. Outside of the time at VidCon last year where we locked eyes for a second and then she pulled out her phone to call security. So there's that too. But no. Ultimately, Yeah, that was my favorite. Like, how can you sit there and it's just, oh my God. Oh my God. Now, in fact, during the 2015 E3 press conference that Bethesda held, Anita Sarkeesian used Feminist Frequency Twitter account to reproach the industry for the extreme violence that was on display for the then upcoming release of the 2016 version of Doom. This tweet was posted on June 14, 2015, saying the level of extreme violence shouldn't be considered normal. That's not an excuse to say it's expected because Doom, that's the problem. Right. So when at you know, E3 2015, when they showed off the Doom footage, everyone lost their minds because Doom is a godsend of a first person shooter. And Anita was out there basically just and no one cared. Everyone laughed at her for that too. Everyone laughed at her. That was kind of like the beginning of the end of Anita Sarkeesian getting any kind of like real, I think, rational attention. It's been almost 3 years. Like, she hasn't really been looked at the same since. When she went after Doom, even her comrades were just like, you're gonna want to stop. Okay, you're gonna want to stop there. She goes on. So here it goes. President Donald Trump said the exact same thing about violent video games. Here is a tweet from December 17th, 2012. From Trump before he became the president of the United States. Now, keep in mind, this is within the same year that Anita started the Tropes Be Women campaign. This was before that stuff ended up coming out. So it says that video game violence and glorification must be stopped. It is creating monsters. Now, I forget. Oh, no, that was the Sandy Hook shooting, I think. I have a feeling that's what he was referring to as Sandy Hook. That was right around the same time. And then again, I still don't remember if Adam Lanza, you know, when he killed his mother, took her gun safe key, took her guns to Sandy Hook Elementary and killed those students, if he was doing it because of Doom or because of, what was that in 2012, Halo or some Call of Duty or something. I don't think that was the case. So we already know that video games and violence and causing sexism, there's no intrinsic link between them. We already know this. Study after study after study comes out to basically prove that point time and time again. Gamers might be loud, vocal, you know, kind of douchey idiots from time to time, but they're not going to grab a gun and mow down a whole bunch of people. They're just going to go bang a hooker in GTA, then kill her to get their money back. You know, like good Christians. Sorry. But the similarities in views on violent video games don't act there. Back in 2010, during a presentation before she started the Tropes vs. Women game series, Sarkeesian admitted that not only was she not a fan of video games, but that violent video games were gross. And of course, there was this 2010 clip where she admits she's not a gamer. Now, she says here, I'm not exactly in fandom. I'm not a fan of video games. I actually had to learn a lot about video games in the process of making this. I would love to play video games, but I don't want to go around shooting people or ripping off their heads. It's just gross. Hence, this is my response to that. But the thing is, I think what we have to take into a serious account here is the fact that Anita Sarkeesian discovered that YouTube and video games were a goldmine. And she decided to come on in from and I have to use very large air quotes here for critical lens, to further slander and vilify gaming and gamers as a way to push her own political and feminist ideology. That's what she did. And she hasn't fully gone away. And at this point now, she's more of a joke than anything else. I think people pretty much acknowledge that, but she's still a hypocrite for, you know, trying to go after Trump for this particular comment. Now, instead of outright calling for censorship, Anita wanted to subvert the way people viewed violent video games by subliminally pushing the anti-violent stance through anti-sexist rhetoric, which was actually attached to the broader discussion about toxic masculinity. Now, toxic masculinity is more often or not a Jonathan McIntosh angle. Ever since he left her particular series, that has kind of died down. By addressing sexism in gaming, Sarkeesian used it as a way to discuss patriarchal tendencies of video games that were born of toxic masculinity. Hence, she viewed violent video games as being the subset of that masculine trait. She's trying to say that it's the root cause. She's trying to say that it's the symptom. Or no, it's not the symptom, that it's the disease. Effectively trying to say that. Even though, again, countless studies and countless studies and countless studies and countless studies have proven that that is objectively false. President Donald Trump didn't have to use gender politics to get across his dislike of violence in media, simply stating that I'm hearing more and more that people say the levels of violence on video games is really shaping young people's thoughts. Whenever Trump says I'm hearing more and more, it's a thought he just thought up himself. I mean, it's pretty apparent at this point that when he says that, no one actually told him that. It's just something that like he thought of and doesn't want to actually assign ownership to his own thoughts. Go back and look at every time he says that. You can pretty much tell. In a separate meeting with members of Congress just recently, President Trump reiterating his disdain for extreme violence, saying, I think it's very important. The video games, the movies, the internet stuff, it's so violent, it's so incredible. I see it. I get to see things you'd be amazed at. I have a young, very young son who watches. I look at some of the things he's watching and I say, how is that possible? And this is what kids are watching. And maybe you should have a look at it. Well, here's the thing with that, Donald Trump. I understand where you're coming from with Barron. I do. I in no way am I going to look at a father who clearly is 59 years older, or really 60 years older than his youngest son, and try to pretty much realize that the father's going to have a solid grasp on what the kid is watching. But as what I would say in any one of these situations, I would very much love to see an example provided. I don't know what Barron watches. Is it The Walking Dead or is it Powerpuff Girls? These are things we need to know to have a better an idea of the context of what you're saying here. But that's the thing. He speaks in generalities that are designed as specifics, even though they're not. Both Donald Trump and Anita Sarkeesian believe that overt violence in video games are gross and incredible, the latter of which was used with negative connotations. Both believe that video game media can shape the minds of players. No, well, I mean, video game media in terms of like maybe the marketing is what they're referring to, but when it comes to like actual games journalists, let's be fair, they don't. While Sarkeesian never focused solely on video game violence in her videos, she did believe that sexist themes in games could help shape sexist views about women in real life. From the first episode of Tropes v. Women, she states this: the reality is that this trope is being used in a real-world context where backward sexist attitudes are already rampant. It's a sad fact that a large percentage of the world's population still clings to the deeply sexist belief that women as a group need to be sheltered, protected, and taken care of by men. The belief that women are somehow naturally weaker gender is a deeply ingrained, socially constructed myth, which of course is completely false, but the notion is reinforced and perpetuated when women are continuously portrayed as frail, fragile, and vulnerable creatures. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that all games using the damsel in distress as a plot device are automatically sexist or have no value, but it's undeniable that popular culture is a powerful influence in our lives, and the damsel in distress trope as a recurring trend does help to make normalize extremely toxic, patronizing, and patronistic attitudes about women. Same argument, different subject, but you can see the point, and also the same medium. So to recap, President Donald Trump believes extreme violence can help negatively shape the views and minds of young gamers. Culture critic Anita Sarkeesian believes that violence and sexism can help negatively shape the minds and views of gamers. It's just, they're two sides of the same coin, but that's it. They're like the same argument, just a different target. And it's, yeah, like they are. It's so her going after him for this is just her going after him for Trump. Now, as a way to be politically antipodes to President Trump, we're seeing identitarian propagandists like Sarkeesian and Polygon take opposing stances to what the president has stated, despite sharing similar or identical views in the past. And this is where this is my favorite part, because we're going to see the games journalists' heads spin. They're just going to spin out of control. They're gonna go, oh God, no, I gotta go against Trump. No. This is gonna happen. It's gonna be pretty funny. Hopefully gamers can see through the ruse from the media and certain critics who are now trying to get back in the good grace of the community. This is despite the fact that just over 4 years ago, games journalists launched an anti-gamer crusade that made its way all to the mainstream media. Certain journalists even went as far as to say that members of the gaming community were worse than ISIS. And that, of course, is Devin Faraci, who I did talk about last night. And if we found out him being a male feminist is, a bad thing because he did some bad stuff. But here's another thing, too. Something that Billy D here did not cover, and I think should be added to this. When President Donald Trump when he was President-elect Donald Trump, Miss Sarkeesian, who does head up the Feminist Frequency 501c3 nonprofit organization, took to the streets in protest, live streaming and live tweeting on the Feminist Frequency Twitter, as well as the Feminist Frequency Facebook page. She released a video talking about how they basically wanted to battle Trump, and she was soliciting donations as a way to continue doing that. Basically, what happened at that moment in time was she was violating the rules of a 501c3 nonprofit, which cannot use their platform to engage in political discourse. That is a violation. She could lose a classification. When that was called out, which I believe it was first by Thunderfoot, she promptly stopped. So Anita Sarkeesian is hugely anti-Donald Trump, and she would take the exact opposite stance of him as a way to just fight back. Now, what I would love, and I mean this in the most earnest of ways, if there was a way that we could get Donald Trump to say Gamergate was a bad thing, and that Gamergate were the bad guys, which we all know is a lie, would Anita, at that point, and her cronies at Polygon, Zoe Quinn and Kotaku, all of a sudden come running to us with open arms simply to oppose the president? I think they'd heavily consider it.